nervous system regulation, it can be spoken about quite a lot these days. Essentially, it drives every single thing we are doing. So we get bombarded with millions of pieces of information every day. And if we were to consciously pay attention to every single piece of information, we would never get anything done. It's too much. The changes on our brain structure and our cells is pretty incredible what can actually happen the longer we are in a chronically stressed state. And I can't remember the exact stat. It's somewhere between, I think, 80 and 95% maybe of diseases and things that modern Western humans die from these days are because of chronic dysregulation and chronic stress.
Welcome to Blisstopia podcast. I'm your host, Mercedes Castellani, life purpose coach, business owner, and your spiritual guide on all things mindset, manifestation, and purpose. This podcast is a space for deep reflections, meaningful conversations to help you expand your mind, dive into the depths of your soul, and create a life that makes you feel alive. Whether you're walking, driving, or simply vibing, take a deep breath and get ready to dive. Hello, my love. Welcome to another episode of Blisstopia podcast. I'm your host, Mercedes Castellani, and I'm so happy to be recording this episode. Today, we're going to talk about nervous system regulation with Jenny Adams. Jenny is a somatic ADHD business coach supporting neurodivergent well-being practitioners to earn more, work less, and avoid burnout with trauma-informed business strategies. She won the ADHD Women's Coach of the Year, and she has her own podcast called Calm Your Nervous System. And for the record, Jenny and I, we met last year. We did a mastermind together. So we met online. We spent 6 months kind of like hanging out in the online space on a very daily basis, I would say. And then we actually traveled together to Australia in November. So that's where we met in person, which was so much fun. And it literally felt like we had known each other for forever. So thank you, Jenny, for being here. I'm super happy to have this conversation, to bring you to the Blisstopia community so that they can learn from you.
Thank you. I'm already tearing up. So this is very me. On brand. I'm crying. Thank you. Yeah, that was such a lovely introduction. And yeah, just reflecting on the last 6 months of last year and that trip to Australia and all the incredible things that we get to do as our jobs and our work, which, I wake up some days and I'm like, how is this my life? This is incredible. So it's great to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the beauty of a mastermind is when you are in a mastermind, you're not just learning from a coach. So we had a coach, an Australian coach, but you're also learning from the women that are there. And in my case, I feel like I particularly learned so much from you because you're so generous with your knowledge. You know so much about nervous system regulation that literally I learned a lot from you. I learned a lot from some of the other ladies in the mastermind. So I was really keen in bringing you to the podcast so you could share your wisdom with my community.
Yeah, and I'm really happy to be here. And it's nice to hear that as well, because I think when we are experts in what we do, we kind of forget what we actually know. That when you guys are talking about certain struggles, I'm like, oh yeah, well, that's your nervous system doing something. That's just me sharing, like, well, yeah, everyone knows this, right? And then, you guys were sometimes like, oh God, that's really helpful to know. I didn't know that. I thought I was going crazy, or, this was a point I should be quitting, or, having one of those wobbles. And it's like, no, that's just your nervous system. So I'm glad that information was helpful, because we all need to know more about this stuff because it drives our life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's start by the very beginning. What is nervous system regulation for the woman who's listening to this and she's not familiar yet with nervous system? What is nervous system regulation and what did it actually do in your life? What did it change for you?
So nervous system regulation, it can be spoken about quite a lot these days. Essentially, it drives every single thing we are doing. So we get bombarded with millions of pieces of information every day. And if we were to consciously pay attention to every single piece of information, we would never get anything done. It's too much. So our brain and our body goes into what it's familiar with. It goes into autopilot. So it doesn't have to process every single piece of information. And essentially, our nervous system, and I'm talking about predominantly our autonomic nervous system, which if you think of the word autonomic, sounds like automatic. the purpose of the autonomic nervous system is to ask a simple question. Is this safe or is this not safe? So if you're getting chased by a tiger, your nervous system is going to go into a sympathetic or a fight-flight state and say, get away. It's not prioritizing things like digesting your food, connecting to people, healing any wounds. It's going, get the fuck away from this because it's a danger. Now, the thing is, we don't live in a world anymore where we get chased by tigers. But that email from your boss at 5 to 5 saying, can we have a quick chat? That can often stimulate the exact same process. And when we don't metabolize that stress, especially if we're in jobs where we're sitting down a lot, we're not moving all that much, we're constantly being bombarded with all this stress hormones, stress information. And when we aren't doing anything with that, and now I'm sure we will talk more about how it turns into burnout and chronic illness. But what brought me to this work was the hard way, because I didn't realize any of this stuff. And I remember waking up back when I had a corporate job, my alarm would go off every morning. And I mean, it was a running joke in our mastermind. Like, I'm not an early person. My alarm going off in the morning and having to be at a desk by 9 o'clock and having ADHD as well and just being chronically late. It felt like someone who'd come in my room and like put a gun to my head. And like the stress hormones that would run through my body when my alarm went off was horrible. And I remember thinking, what is this? Like, I remember going to the doctors and saying, like, it feels like someone's just come in and like screamed in my face, and my whole body's just been like, what's going on? And shaking, and like this adrenaline running through me. And they just didn't seem to quite understand, like, what is that? And it was through me getting, unfortunately, very chronically ill, through not understanding that I had ADHD, not realizing how bad my trauma actually was, and just pushing through, you know, being the person that's there for everybody else. I can manage everything. You know, I've got the successful job. I've got the nice car. Just keep going. It can't be that bad. And I kept ignoring these symptoms that my body was showing me. And I kind of pushed through burnout. And that then, it just took me down. I ended up with a chronic illness. I ended up spending a lot of my 20s feeling so sick, but not being taken seriously, that I almost manifested my own disability, because I was like, people aren't taking me seriously when I'm telling them how unwell I am. Maybe if I'm reliant on a wheelchair, they might actually take me seriously. And I honestly think I manifested how sick I became, but I also got myself out of that. So I spent a lot of my 20s reliant on a wheelchair. And it was when I decided, I'm done. I'm not spending the rest of my life like this. I am such a travel person. I'm such an alive person. I can't just sit and exist. There's too much to life to go out and enjoy. And it was when I made that decision, I happened to come across this trio of things that actually really helped. One was therapy and actually working on some of my trauma. One was changing my diet, and I went vegan and taking away the inflammation of dairy. And the other one was finding a movement practice that actually made me feel safe in my body. And movement to me, or exercise to me before, was go to the gym, push yourself, no pain, no gain. And I hated it. And I would never do it because I hated it. And it was happening to find those three in the same year that changed my life. And I look back now and I realize that was a form of me regulating my nervous system. It was me letting go of some of the stress from the trauma. It was me not filling my body full of inflammatory foods and signaling threat to myself constantly. And it was finding that wonderful movement practice that I actually enjoyed and I wanted to do more of. And I was getting curious about my body and how things feel. And I realized now that that was the start of that nervous system regulation journey. And then I've been down many, many rabbit holes since. I quit my corporate job when things just didn't feel in alignment at all anymore. And I started to see the clients I was working with, and I wanted to keep getting to the root cause of what's going on. So I've done lots and lots of different trainings over the years. Everything is very much trauma-informed, based in nervous system regulation. And it's just one of these tools that I think the more we speak about, the more it just becomes the norm. The more abundant, the more regulated, the more conscious and kind the world becomes. Because so much of the shit going on in the world at the moment is because people are stuck in a chronically threatened state of their nervous system. And when we're in that place, everything feels like a threat. We have to defend ourselves, every man for themselves. And that's not what humanity is best at doing. It's good at that short term, not long term. And this is why this is such a mission for me, to spread this to more people, because it's such important work.
Absolutely. And the thing is, when you're in a constant stress of dysregulation, which we could also explain what is regulation and dysregulation, but when you're in the constant state of dysregulation, you don't even realize. You're just pushed through, you wake up, and that's kind of like your setting, like your base setting. You wake up and you're stressed, and you wake up and you're feeling anxious, and you just carry day after day feeling that way. And it just feels normal to you. And you're not thinking, am I regulated? Am I dysregulated? What's going on? You just live that way. And I know it was like that for me when I was in corporate. I was like dysregulated every day for years. Luckily, I found meditation at some point, and I think I didn't realize, but that really helped me regulate myself. So it was kind of like my little oasis. So that really helped me. But otherwise, if I'm really honest with myself, I had always, anxiety in my chest. I was always thinking, I was always in a constant state of stress and anxiety, always thinking about the future. And then when I quit my corporate job and I started, setting my business with my own rhythms, just listening to my body more, being able to sleep more, commute less, sleep more, I was like, oh, actually, there's it's like, you feel like a little robot who's actually like coming to life. And it's like, I can actually feel a different way. I can actually have a full day when I don't have anxiety in my chest and I'm in the present and I can actually be this way. But it takes some time to kind of like do a detox from dysregulation, because we also get addicted to that dysregulation. So you need some time to kind of like come off that drug in a sense, because we do get addicted also to this regulation. So can you explain very briefly, because you and I were acquainted with dysregulation and regulation, but what is regulation and dysregulation, and why is all of this important? Like, why should we even be thinking about these things?
Yeah, great question. And I think it's just important to also highlight that our nervous system loves familiarity. So like you say, if that certain level of anxiety and stress feels normal and that certain level of dysregulation feels normal, that is your nervous system going, I know what this is like. And this is why I ended up in years and years and years of constantly being in a toxic and abusive relationships, because it was familiar. And you can consciously say, I don't want this, but your nervous system is pulling you back into that. And if you are someone that says, it's just one thing after another, I've changed my job and I've moved home and I've got a new partner and there's still something that's not right. It's like, that's your nervous system wanting that familiarity. So actually recognizing, maybe I am chronically dysregulated. And the difference between regulation and dysregulation, I would say, basically, regulation is when you can be in the present moment. Everything feels okay. You're quite content. You're not needing to rush towards getting something or running away from something. You can consciously work towards your goals, but that urgency, that desperation isn't there. You can connect with people. You can connect with yourself, with animals, with nature. And it's not a needing to, it's an ease. And this can vary. And yes, I'm an expert in nervous system regulation. I still get dysregulated all the time. Living in that constant state of regulation is also probably not realistic for anyone. It's how flexible our nervous system is, that when you do get dysregulated, how quickly can you come out of that? Because when I used to get dysregulated, I thought I would probably just live in a chronically dysregulated state for years. And then it turned into maybe months or weeks or days. Something might happen. And then there'd be a few days of, everything feeling terrible and spiraling. And it's a lot quicker now when something like that happens, because we're human. Shit happens. We're going to get dysregulated. We're going to get triggered. How quickly can you pull yourself out of that? So dysregulation essentially is anything that isn't that state. So it's when you might notice your digestion's not working, your palms are sweaty, your breath is very much up in your chest. You might get chronic symptoms of certain things, and this is a chronic dysregulation. Your heart rate's beating faster, breath is different. You might feel quite hopeless. So depression is a long-term state of dysregulation. So is anxiety. One is just depression is a dorsal part of your nervous system, which is the freeze shutdown. Anxiety is more the sympathetic fight flight, because it's more active. They are both signs of dysregulation long term. So it can look different for a lot of people. You might notice, I don't know, next time you get an email or next time you notice something pisses you off or you're wanting to defend yourself, that's you triggered and dysregulated. And just notice, what does that feel like for you? Do you feel angry? Do you feel like crying? Do you want to run away? Do you just feel like giving up? You know, what are those things? Because they are different for each of us. And one of the processes I guide my clients through is how to actually map out what that looks like for you. What does regulated feel like for you? What is a ventral? What is a sympathetic? What does a dorsal state feel like for you? And where is your baseline? So hopefully that explains dysregulation and regulation.
Absolutely. And I love also this idea that you're saying that regulation is not like we get there and now we're going to stay in that space forever. It's kind of like something, in my experience, that you need to try to adjust on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, because sometimes your day starts fantastic and then all of a sudden something will, dysregulate you or trigger something like a certain email or a certain message or whatever, a conversation that you were not expecting or a conversation that didn't go well, whatever it might be. And then it's like, okay, how do we go back to that level? And ideally having a more dominant regulation with some moments of dysregulation, but then we do something to try to soothe and calm down and come back to this basic fundamental state of regulation. But it's not going to be like, okay, now we get it all perfect and now we're this Buddha who never gets upset by anything. And actually, if I understood correctly, the way we actually build that nervous system is also we need to expand it a little bit. So it's not like we don't want any stress in our lives. It's actually quite healthy to have a little bit of stress, but it's also how do we cope with that stress? How do we manage? How do we charge and discharge that stress that might be coming up?
Yeah, and I used to work with a lot of people with chronic illnesses, having a chronic illness myself. And one of the worst things you can actually do is go into that shutdown and just completely rest. If you're not adding some stress to your system, you're not going to expand. And sometimes you do need that state of deep rest for a while. But if we're not adding some stress, this is why we exercise. Exercise is stress. And the more we do it, you don't go into the gym and try and pick up a 50 kilo weight. You start with a 5 kilo and then a 10 kilo. You build yourself up because each time you're stressing the body, and that is how you allow yourself to build up to heavier weights. Exactly the same with your nervous system. And going back to the regulation, dysregulation, the way I love to look at this is if you think of an anchor on a boat, and if that boat or ship has dropped anchor, it is attached to something. Now that boat is not just going to stay still above this anchor. It's going to move around. So if there's a storm that comes, it's still attached to this anchor. It might be quite, wavy. It might move around quite a lot. And it depends how tight that anchor chain, whatever you call it, is, that it can end up going, quite far, but it's still attached to the ground. Now, this attachment is that drop into a ventral state. That's your connected, calm, regulated place. So as long as you've got an anchor into that, you can go off and get dysregulated and you can come back. You can see the storm through, knowing there's a degree of safety here that I can get through this. I will be okay. It's when the anchor gets lifted or we don't even have it, that's when we get lost in the storm.
I love this. I love this metaphor. And this is kind of the type of things that Jenny would share with us on a random Tuesday on a voice note. And it's so full of wisdom. And you're like, wow, let me sit and digest all this. I'm like mind blown.
Yeah, the random analogies that come out of my mouth sometimes.
I love it.
One of my clients just finds hilarious.
But I love it because it's so, it's so visual, and it's like, okay, whatever is happening outside of the water, you always have your anchor and you always have some tools. And I think it's also important to find the tools that work for each and every one of us. For me, it's meditation for sure. So it's like, okay, what's your anchor? What's that one thing that is going to kind of like allow you to calm down, come back to your center. And no matter what happens on the external world, you have that. And that's why I'm such a big believer in meditation, because anything could happen. You could be anywhere. You could be, have no possessions whatsoever. You will still have your breath. You will always have your breath. So that's why I'm so passionate about meditation. But I think it's important for every person to find their own techniques. So let's imagine a woman who's in an office and she has a very big meeting coming up, important meeting, or she needs to make an important presentation. And she's feeling kind of nervous. This doesn't feel safe. Maybe there's going to be some senior management in there. There's big stakes for this meeting. She needs to do a good job. So what are 3 micro regulation tactics that she could use to find that anchor, even if, there's this big meeting coming up?
Yeah, great question. And I just want to reiterate as well that regulation and that ventral state isn't always about being calm, because things like this happen in life. And again, it's how flexible we can be to adapt. So this is the anchor. The anchor is I can do this. Okay, I'm going into a big meeting. I'm feeling some things. There's some butterflies in my stomach. My palms are sweaty. I'm not breathing fully. If you're aware of that, what often happens is people will say, let me just look over my notes again and make sure I'm really prepared. And I need to get the facts correct. You're probably not actually taking that information in, because the part of your brain that deals with planning, organization is switched off, because the survival part of your brain is switched on. So there's no point trying to do anything when you know you're dysregulated. Go regulate first and then come back to the facts. So a few things that you could do if you're somebody that prefers being on your own. I would take a few minutes away. So when I was working in corporate, the toilets were my best friend. So I would go to the disabled toilet. I would take a blanket, I'd put it on the floor. I'd do a bit of meditation, even if it's just a toilet cubicle sometimes. It was just that space for me for a few minutes to just not have anything else going on. It was quiet. No one was talking to me. So, getting somewhere safe. I think offices now have things like, breakout and regulation rooms for things like this, but we didn't back in my day. So the toilets for it. But even if you can't do that, things that you can do on the spot, stretching. So if you stand up, and you don't even need to do that, stand up, great if you can. Bring your arms up over your head, have a stretch, take a breath in here, and then you can drop your arms, let them release. But even in just stretching your arms overhead, you're actually opening up your diaphragm. And the sub-diaphragm, so your belly, essentially, is where your parasympathetic part of your nervous system, the more regulated part, lives. So if you're waking up that pathway through a stretch, great. Also, you can use the breath, which is another great tool for your diaphragm. So one, especially in an anxious situation, I love the physiological sigh. So I'll talk you through this if this is helpful. And if you're listening, you can do a few as well. Essentially what it is you take a breath in through your nose, you hold it, you take another breath in through your nose, and then you sigh out through your mouth. So if you want to do this with me, it's essentially a breath in through the nose, another one, and then an exhale through the mouth. And I do maybe 3 of those. So let's do 2 more. So in through the nose, in again, out through the mouth. One more.
Love it.
In through the nose, in again, and out.
I love it.
Notice the difference? Is
it's like, what was I actually even thinking about? Why was I even worried about these things?
Yeah. And that's a great one to do when people don't really notice, because there's tools you can use like shaking and more physical stuff that, you might look a bit weird. There's also stuff, you can lift your arms up. You can take a few breaths. Another one would be orienting, which is just looking around your space. And you can either say, okay, I'm going to run through my senses. What can I see, hear, smell, taste, touch? Or I want to find something pink, let's say. What can I see in my space that's pink? Or can I see some nature? Can I look out the window? Can I see a pigeon? Can I see a tree? I've got plants in my office. Just looking around and seeing what you can connect to, because that opens up that pathway of curiosity. And if you're in a curious state, you're generally in a regulated one. So there's a few things that you can do that are quick, simple, easy, and also just giving yourself permission and some compassion that if you're about to go into a big meeting, you obviously care a lot about it. That's why your body's reacting in a certain way. You're not doing anything wrong. But if you can get as regulated as you can, you're probably going to be able to do that meeting better than if you go in super anxious and you can't get your words out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I love about these 3 micro regulations techniques is that you can do them very easily. They're kind of like invisible, even if you want. You can do the stretching, in the toilet before you go to the meeting. And before it's your time to speak on the meeting, you can be breathing, regulating yourself, or actually trying to find something, whatever, your favorite color or something related to nature. And you can do this in there with other people, and it's kind of like invisible. So it's quite easy to introduce those.
And I remember one of my clients saying this to me last year, actually, that they were in a meeting I think they were asking for a promotion, or it was quite a big meeting anyway. And they went in with some of these regulation tools and came out saying, you know what, I could feel myself getting a bit flustered, a bit dysregulated in the meeting. And I think they said they were using like another one with like grounding. So feeling feet on the floor, hand on the desk. But they said just in that moment, that was that choice of, do I let this dysregulation take me over, or do I regulate? They came out of that meeting with a 20% pay rise.
Beautiful. So the moment of dysregulation and stress handled in the best possible way, the most regulated way, was actually super, super useful. Because as we said before, it's not about eliminating stress, because that's what's going to make us grow. Is how can we expand ourselves? But as we expand ourselves, it's going to feel dysregulating. So we want to gently come back to regulation. But that's the only way we can grow, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So when we were in the mastermind, at some point, I remember you shared something about anxiety and excitement being like kind of similar for the nervous system. And I was like mind blown again. So can you explain a little bit more about this? Because in my mind, before we had this conversation, anxiety and excitement are like 2 completely different opposites. But how do they relate? What's happening actually in the nervous system?
Yeah. So this is through the polyvagal theory, which is Stephen Porges' theory of what's going on in the autonomic nervous system. And essentially there's 3 states to this, which I've hinted at already. Dorsal, which is the freeze state, sympathetic, which is the fight flight, and then we've got the ventral, which is the calm and connected. We move up, it's like a ladder. So we have to, if we're in dorsal, we need to go to sympathetic. If we're in sympathetic, we want to get to dorsal. We have the ventral. We have to move up and down this ladder. We do this numerous times a day. Now, the sympathetic and the dorsal, so the 2 lower ones, are generally associated with dysregulation. They're more of an activated state. In those 2 states, there's kind of a good and a bad. There's a useful and a not so useful. I don't really like using good and bad. So if you want to go for a run, for example, I know you like running, you need to get yourself into a sympathetic state. Doesn't mean you're dysregulated, doesn't mean you're doing anything bad. You're just using some of that energy for something more positive. When we're looking at the sympathetic part of your nervous system, on one side of that, we have anxiety. It sits often in your stomach. It can be that sweaty palm, fast breathing, maybe slightly trapped, or like, I need to do something element. What does excitement feel like? Sweaty palms, butterflies in your stomach, breathing is maybe a little bit quicker, heart rate's going a bit quicker. Physically, they feel quite similar, don't they? They're both activating the same part of your nervous system. They're both showing very similar symptoms. it's our thoughts that are controlling how we interpret these. So if we're having these symptoms and we know I'm just about to go into a big meeting, we go, that must be anxiety. And then we start to go, what can I do about this? And have I prepared? And oh my God, and then it gets worse. Whereas if we can go, okay, I'm noticing some anxiety, or even better, I'm noticing there's butterflies in my stomach, my palms are sweaty, my heart's beating a little bit faster. Can I shift this into excitement? I'm about to go into a big meeting. Oh my God, I'm about to pitch this thing. I'm about to get a promotion. How similar is the feeling, but how different is that feeling when we can actually switch it from anxiety to excitement? And an easy way to do this, and you might feel a bit silly doing it, but try it, is to just, stand up and be like, yes, I'm doing this. Yeah, I'm really excited. Physically embody that excitement, even if you feel a bit stupid, and just notice what happens. And it's the same reason, even if we're sad sometimes and we smile, it releases serotonin. And eventually you'll start to feel the smile. If someone laughs and you're like, that's a bit forced, you then start laughing at them laughing. It's that kind of tricking the body into, oh, this is okay, because if I'm excited about this, I'm not about to get eaten by a tiger. I'm about to go and find something new. Go into something new, something exciting.
Absolutely. And this is reminding me actually when I went to the Tony Robbins event last year, we did the fire walking experience. So basically you're walking on ashes, and basically he puts you in this state. First, it's a very deep hypnosis state. So rewiring the subconscious mind, also regulating the nervous system for it. But as we went from the stadium where we were to the place where we were actually doing the fire walking, we were saying, yes, 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 yes. And I think what this was actually doing, now that you're explaining this, what this was actually doing is we were actually switching from, instead of being, because it was quite a long walk, maybe like 20 minutes, from the moment you leave your seat in the stadium to the place where you're actually going to do the fire walking, you have 20 minutes. You could definitely be like overthinking, oh my God, am I really going to do this? Is it going to work? Blah, blah, blah. And this was actually like, yes, yes, yes. Like, I'm actually going to do it. I'm actually going to walk on fire. I'm crazy. But I think that's what we were doing. We were actually switching from fear and anxiety, which were absolutely normal in that situation before you walk on fire, to excitement. I'm actually going to do this crazy thing, but it gets to be really fun, and it's going to be a fun anecdote afterwards. So I think that's maybe what we were doing. So I think this is a beautiful shift in perspective, from, oh my God, I need to do this thing and it's making me feel so dysregulated, to I get to do this thing. I'm about to do this thing. Oh my God, I'm about to be on stage. I'm about to be in a podcast. I'm about to have this big meeting. I'm about to get a huge salary raise that I deserve. So I'm about to, and I get to. It really helps reframe and bring a little bit more joy and excitement to something that otherwise feels just foreign, basically. And because it's foreign, it makes us feel dysregulated. But then the more we're going to do it and the more we're going to do it, it's going to become safe, it's going to become normal. And then eventually it's just going to be part of who you are. You don't care. And then you're going to go to the next level. And there's going to be another expansion afterwards.
Yeah. And going back to how much our nervous system loves familiarity, we're going to get more of what we do. So if every time we feel anxious, we make a huge deal about it, and like, this is something that I've definitely done with regards to money in the past, is I've avoided it until it's ready to actually look at my finances. And then when I do, because I've waited for so long, it's really stressful. So then next time I don't want to do it. And if we're constantly reinforcing, that's really hard, that's really stressful, we're not going to want to do it again, are we? But if we can change that and look at things through a more regulated lens, so when we are doing something hard, we're like, well done me, I'm doing amazing, I'm going to break this down, I'm going to make this small, I'm doing a good job. It becomes a lot easier. It becomes more of an enjoyable experience. And our nervous system will remember that, instead of, oh, that was really stressful, I'm not doing that again. And going back to the yes, yes, yes thing, and I can't wait to go and see Tony Robbins this year. I remember when I was doing my embodiment training a few years ago, we had to do an exercise where we would like kind of go in on ourselves, like get into a little bit of a fetal position, head down, back rounded, and we try and smile here, and like I'm doing this now if you're listening, not watching, can you hear how my voice has changed? Versus when you stand up and, you put your shoulders back and you're more, upright, it's so much easier for that energy to flow and for you to feel more positive. And if you try and go into that shrunken place and smile or say yes, it's a hell of a lot harder than if you are, shoulders back, standing up, you're in that like power pose. Our posture, our behavior, our body language says so much. And we can manipulate this quite easily by just tricking the body into, if I'm in this power pose, I can do anything. So go into your meeting like Superwoman, because you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's simple things, like the power pose or what you were saying, the stretch, making yourself really, really big. It's also proven that it's going to shift the chemicals in your body. So it's knowing these things and kind of like tricking your body and tricking your brain into this is actually super fun. We've done this so many times, and basically tricking the brain into thinking this is safe, which probably at the end of the day, it is safe if you actually think about it. You're going to do the presentation. It's going to be fine. You've rehearsed, you're going to ask for that promotion. Maybe they say yes, maybe they say no, but you needed to ask anyways for it. So at the end of the day, it's probably safe. And it's just our minds that are creating a history and making things look unsafe when probably it's just going to be okay. We can trust that it's just going to be okay.
And we have to remember that 95% of our behaviors, actions, thoughts are driven by our subconscious mind, which is essentially the seat of our nervous system, because it costs us energy to have to keep thinking new things. So we're always going to go down that path of least resistance. And if we've got 95% of those behaviors driven on autopilot and 5% saying, but I know this is safe, I know this is okay, that 95 is going to win 9 times out of 10, unless you're doing some subconscious reprogramming and working with your nervous system to actually shift them and build up new evidence that you are neuroplastic and you can change things.
Absolutely. So what about, if we go a little bit deeper on this, what about people who are going through burnout? Burnout is the pandemic that no one is talking about, but we have every year more and more cases of burnout. So what is actually happening at a nervous system level for a person to reach actual burnout? Because also sometimes I think we're overusing the word when it's not fully a burnout, but for the people who unfortunately do experience burnout, what is actually happening at the nervous system level?
And burnout, I mean, it can be subjective. I don't know if there is a technical, like NHS, nice guidelines for burnout, but if it's something you identify with, often it's a lack of energy. And another huge thing with burnout is it's often a lack of motivation and that get up and go and purpose, essentially. And I know I've burnt out many times in my corporate jobs that I was off sick. I was having to get a new job. And since I've started my own business, I think I'm in my 5th or 6th year in business now. And I've been through some really, really, really stressful times in my business. I've not burnt out once. And I can still say I'm neurodivergent. I have a highly sensitive nervous system. I haven't burnt out because I'm doing something I love. So there's a huge element in burnout with you actually living in alignment and doing something that matters. Because essentially what's happening in your nervous system when you burn out is you have run out of how long you can stay in that chronically stressed state. If you're running on things like adrenaline and cortisol, they're designed to get us out of short-term stress. They're not designed to be worked or lived on long-term. When you're also in that dysregulated, chronically stressed phase for a long time, you're probably struggling to sleep, which is when your body is naturally healing. You're probably not digesting your food properly because your body doesn't need to when there's a tiger chasing you. You aren't healing. So if you've got a cut or if you've got a cold, it's another thing people often catch viruses and colds because your body is preparing to save its life. not to actually say, now's my downtime to rest and recover and recuperate. And the changes on our brain structure and our cells is pretty incredible what can actually happen the longer we are in a chronically stressed state. And I can't remember the exact stat. It's somewhere between, I think, 80 and 95% maybe of diseases and things that modern Western humans die from these days are because of chronic dysregulation and chronic stress. And if you think of the stuff that people are dying from or getting later in life, not always later in life, just getting diabetes, heart disease, cancers, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, all of these sorts of things, we didn't get them back in caveman days. These are a result of, this is what happens to the body when we live in a chronically stressed environment, that those cells aren't able to replenish themselves and heal and recover. So they start to metastasize into things like cancers. And we're giving them a fertile breeding ground to grow. And this is also why women tend to get a lot more chronic illnesses, because we are conditioned generally to put our needs last, to be nice, to do what other people want instead of what we want. And it's that suppression of our feelings, it's that general more sensitivity that we tend to be the ones that then have the chronic illnesses, the fibromyalgia, the MS, type 2 diabetes, all of these sorts of chronic issues, long COVID, because, and I think every single woman I've worked with or ever met that has one of these sorts of conditions has said, I'm not an angry person. And they're always the people pleaser, the one that will do anything for anyone. And that's not just a coincidence. That's happened on purpose, because that is suppression. That is chronic dysregulation turning up in some kind of disease. And that's what happens when burnout isn't dealt with. And I don't just want this to sound really negative, because if we have the power to create that very unconsciously, subconsciously, we also have the power to reverse that. I mean, 10 years ago, I was told I'd be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. Like, we met in Australia. I could not have got there.
Huge high heels.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say I could walk in high heels, but, you know, we went out on that beautiful day to Crystal Castle. Something like that, I wouldn't have been able to do, let alone the travel. And that was me not taking that for gospel. Like, that's not going to be my life. I'm done with all of this chronic shit. I can, if I've created this, I can change this. So if you're hearing this and you're like, oh my God, I'm burnt out, I don't know where to start, just start small. Just start with those little moments of regulation, anything that's going to take a little bit of that stress off, because it's cumulative. It can be reversed. You don't have to stay like this forever.
So thank you so much for sharing that. And I think the same way we got into those things over several years of dysregulation, we can slowly start getting back into a more regulated state. What would you recommend to a woman who's in that burnout state? So the nervous system is really at capacity, basically. What would you recommend her to gently soothe her nervous system?
So if you are someone that recognizes some of those burnout symptoms, reach out to somebody, because often, especially for women, we feel like we're a failure if we're struggling in some way. And it is such a key attachment state that I could go down a rabbit hole into. I won't. If we can actually reach out and ask for help and be supported, if we're constantly the ones giving support, we need to be able to receive that support, because when we're too much in that masculine giving, we're unbalanced. So reach out to somebody, whether it's a friend, a doctor, a coach, a counselor, you know, somebody that can support you along this journey. And having a play, like getting curious with what makes you feel good. Because for some people, it might be going for a walk. It might be just getting out in nature. For some, it might be slightly more active. And especially if you're noticing that you are burning out, you might know that you are someone that really wants to use some of this fight flight energy. You want to go for a run. You want to go to the HIIT classes. That might also sound like hell. you then might be the person that wants to go towards the meditation and the breath work and the calming aspects of your nervous system. So notice where you are. One is not better or worse than the other. You need a balance of both. So I quite often laugh at myself because I'm a qualified meditation teacher and I struggle to meditate because my system prefers to be in that more activated, sympathetic place because I've lived in it for so much of my life. It's too big a drop sometimes to go from that activated place into just quiet, deep meditation. But I will listen to certain meditation practices whilst I'm out for a walk. That is soothing my nervous system because I'm doing some gentle movement. Things like just seeing certain friends and just being with them. That is also a very soothing thing to do. And it's simple stuff. You know, the whole nervous system regulation is not some behind closed doors thing that only certain people are able to do and it has to be done in a perfect way. Not at all. Some people, it might be yoga, it might be qigong, it might just be walking, it might be spending more time with your dog. It's noticing for you, what are those things that just make you feel, there's a little bit of lightness there. You're probably not clock watching or, you know, what's the next thing I need to do? You're quite present. So any of those things that you know for you, and it's great to have these written down somewhere. So when you are dysregulated and you're going, I don't know, I don't have any tools, you can go back to that list and go, oh yeah, actually, maybe I'll call this person, or maybe I'll give the dog a hug or go take them for a walk, or even just looking at some holiday pictures of the beach, or, you know, I'm in the UK. It's a rare sunny day today. You know, when it's grey and everyone's moaning, it's okay. Can I look at some pictures of when I was in Australia or some pictures of nature? Anything along those lines that you know will help you feel a bit better. And obviously, I go into a lot more depth with my clients in my work with, you know, how to find that blueprint for you. And especially if you're neurodivergent, looking at things like over and under stimulation. How do you move through the different states? How do you find that window of tolerance as well? So that there's, you know, there is more to this, but as a basic blueprint, find the things that give you that properly contented joy. That's not just an escape. It's not you just scrolling Instagram. That feels different to, you know, that moment you might look at your dog sleeping and you're just like, oh, yeah, exactly.
So cute.
I know. One of the cats had her belly out this earlier, like sunbathing, and it's just like, they're just the best, aren't they?
So
there you go.
cute.
That's regulating.
So I love it. I love it. Okay, I think after this podcast, I'm just gonna go cuddle with Amore for a second.
Yeah.
So, like we were saying before, every time we want change, it's going to feel unfamiliar. Unfamiliar feels unsafe. So, how can we, let's imagine a woman who's going to go through a major life transition. Maybe she's taking a new role, a new job, more aligned with her purpose, with a lot more responsibility. And that feels a little bit scary. Maybe she's saying, I want to become an entrepreneur, and that's very scary. So, how can a person expand their nervous system to handle the uncertainty that comes with major life changes? A new role, becoming an entrepreneur, entering into another stage in your life? How do we grow in spite of the fact that it does feel unfamiliar, unsafe, weird? It feels like everything is like, just weird. What would you recommend?
Yep. And it's a very real thing. And this is where, when we grow too fast, we can't maintain it, because growth is not necessarily about how big something can become or how fast you can get there. And this is a perfect example of why people who win the lottery end up bankrupt a few years later, because they haven't built their nervous system capacity up to be able to actually hold that level of wealth or success. And like overnight, you know, pop stars or people that get very famous, they will then kind of come crashing down because they haven't built up that capacity. So sometimes the slow way is often the best way, which I know can be frustrating. We can also quantum leap, but your nervous system has to be ready for that first. So it's the small moments to show that to your body it is safe in this expansion. And even just noticing, and I did a whole podcast episode on this, episode 32 on my podcast, if you want to dive into this in a bit more detail, with looking at expansion and contraction. So if we were looking to expand, we can't fight the contraction. If you think of birth, you don't just expand. The expansion comes from the contractions of life. It would probably hurt even more if you just, expanded immediately. So when you are in those contractions, are you fighting them, or are you saying this is part of the process? I know this is uncomfortable, but this is the rest before the expansion. This is the moment where the downloads might come, where the wisdom comes in, where your body is preparing for something. And I think when you know that, the space to expand is easier. So when it comes to something like growth or money, it's when you're in those moments of contraction or expansion, it's signaling safety. It's saying to yourself, okay, I feel uncomfortable right now, and this is okay. This is part of this. And anything that you can help to become familiar with that level of growth that you want. So things like the subconscious reprogramming and, walking yourself through, when I have XYZ, the thing I want, your body starts to get familiar with how that would feel. So then when it happens, you're not then pushing it away, because your body goes, oh yeah, I know what this is like. And this is also the key to manifesting as well. So giving yourself the permission that this is part of the process, and some of the regulation tools I've talked about earlier, anything essentially that's going to signal to your body that I'm safe, that it is okay to grow, I'm on the right path. And generally that bit of discomfort comes right before a breakthrough. So don't give up when you're like, I can't do this anymore, because you're just about to see it through and get the thing you want. So yeah, keep going.
I love it. And it's what we're saying, the only way to expand is to endure a little bit of stress, regulate, and then continue. And that's just how we're going to grow. And as human beings, we need and we want growth. So the more we can get in this habit of expanding ourselves. And I think we use too much this metaphor of the comfort zone and discomfort and moving outside of a comfort zone. We use it so much that it's kind of like lost its relevance, but it's what we're doing. You move into the zone that feels uncomfortable, you make it comfortable, then you move again, you make it comfortable in your nervous system so you can hold it, and then you can get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger in whichever way you want. Maybe that's professional success or wealth or creating a life in your own terms, however you define that. So that's going to be your circle, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, like you said, this also applies to wealth. So what are some of the practical steps that you recommend to really regulate the nervous system and open up to receiving more wealth?
Yeah, great question. And yeah, just reflecting on the comfort zone thing, I like to phrase that as the familiar zone and the unfamiliar zone. Because again, that's what our nervous system is looking for. Oh, I've just been given a promotion, or my business is taking off. This is really uncomfortable. I don't know what this feels. This is unfamiliar. And that's when we can often go into like the self-sabotage stuff, because we're like, I don't know what this is like. Another thing I was going to say is community, having people around you. So when you're in that moment of, what the fuck am I doing? Should I just give up? Have those safe people around you. And, we had this in our mastermind last year, that I think we all had those wobbles where we were like, am I doing the right thing? Like, where do I go? I'm really uncomfortable. And it was reaching out and having those people around us that are like, yes, you are, you're doing amazing. People need your work. You're doing so well. Who are those people in your life? Because they will help you expand, not only in your job, but also with money. So one of the things that I do with my clients when it comes to money mindset and expansion when it comes to wealth is to get into that subconscious and look at what are those stories? What are those drivers that are dysregulating? So looking at certain patterns, like, do you tend to be more avoidant or anxious when it comes to money? And then looking at where certain stories came from. So if you grew up always being told, money doesn't grow on trees, or you have to work hard to have money, or rich people are bad, those are still in there. So if you say consciously, I want to be rich or wealthy, but you also hold the belief that wealthy people are bad, well, you probably don't want to be a bad person. So you're going to keep blocking them. So unpicking some of that subconscious patterning opens you up to wealth. And going back to what we said earlier, it's signaling safety. It's showing the nervous system, this is okay. And I had a good example of this recently. I've put my one-to-one prices up this year, but quite significantly. And I had a new client who I already knew on the call she was ready, signing up, paying in full. The question at the end of the call was, have you got any questions? She just said, how do I pay? Which is great. It's me going in. Yeah. It's me going into that, expecting that to happen. And I actually sent this over to our coach last year and said, thank you for helping me change some of my mindset so this becomes more normal. And she said, how are you going to go out and celebrate? And I said, I'm not, because I don't celebrate a normal day. I'm very grateful for it, but it's those moments where I've done this before when I've had a big client sign up or, a big chunk of money come to me. And then I'm like, yeah, oh my God, I've got yes, I'm so happy. I'm like really excited. And then my nervous system remembers that and it elevates it. It puts it on this platform of that's not normal. That's an elevated state. And I remember sitting and I actually had my phone open with my bank account with Stripe payments, Stripe. All of these payments, all the green, which is very nice to see. Yes. And I was just sat there looking at this and I was just doing some breathing and just like, this is normal. This is a normal day. On a normal day, I receive this much money. Because when we put things on a pedestal, and I remember you asking this question, when if we want something too much, do we push it away? And we do, because we're making it into something big. And if we think about where we are right now in our lives, and that's for anyone listening, how much progress have you made from where you are right now to maybe where you were a couple of years ago, 10 years ago, even when you were a baby? Like, we have literally grown physically so many times. And have we celebrated like every single moment of that? Or do we come from a place of gratitude and having enough? And if we're constantly in that chasing and wanting and needing, your vibration is sending out those vibes. You're going to get back what you're looking for, what you're putting out. It's making them normal. And if you think about dating, like, no one wants to date the person that's like, I really, really want to get married and have kids like this year. Like, I'm really desperate. You're like, that's gross. But the person that's like, yeah, I'm content as I am. I'm quite happy, open to meeting someone. They're a lot more magnetic. That's our nervous system picking up on those vibes, that energy.
Yes.
Which one feels safer? So signaling safety, making this more normal, and getting yourself around people that encourage and celebrate that wealth can be normal, that we don't all have to work hard to make money. Doesn't mean we sit around on our asses doing nothing, but neither do we have to work 24/7 in order to have the things we want. Making it normal to have the luxury things. I drive a pink sparkly Tesla that I absolutely love. That's my norm now. And I didn't tell anyone when I bought that. I told you guys, because that happened very quickly. But I didn't share that with any like friends or family, because that was one of those real expansion moments of, I trust myself. This is a huge thing I'm about to go and do. If I tell some of my people, they're going to say, how are you going to afford it? And why do you have to get a pink one? And there's going to be some of that stuff. And I'm like, I'm not here for any of that right now. I'm only going to go to the people whilst I'm in that squeezy, like, I'm growing and this is scary and should I do it? When I'm in that moment, I'm going to the people that are like, yes, you fucking will. And you were one of them. Because I remember sharing, like, I can feel my bum getting warmed on the heated seats of my Tesla. You were like, yes, you will. And now that's what I drive.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love this idea of, again, we come back to this making familiar what might seem unfamiliar. So if you're someone who loves luxury, making luxury familiar. If you're someone who loves a certain kind of lifestyle or you have a certain priority and you think money will give you that, making all of that familiar before the money is there, and also as the money is starting to be there, making sure that you're consolidating all of that. Because sometimes something that can happen is the money shows up, people haven't, the nervous system isn't ready to hold it yet. And then we might try to overspend or manifest something bad to get back to our baseline, because that's the baseline that feels normal. But if we can expand and make it familiar, expand and make it familiar, expand and make it familiar, when you're going to look in a couple of years to your life, to your wealth, to your career, it's going to be entirely different. And you will be able to hold all of those blessings that you have in there because you've been expanding slowly your nervous system to be able to really, to really hold all of that magic in your life.
And I love the word steward in here, because I think sometimes when we talk about holding money, because yes, our nervous system needs to be able to receive that money and not then just throw it out the door straight away, because I've definitely been there. But it's not gripping onto it either, because I also see this with people that they get it and they're like, I have to put it all in savings because I'm never going to get this money ever again and I can't spend it. And it's like, no, how can we consciously steward this money? That we're going to be sensible with it, we're going to be conscious, we're going to make good decisions with it. But money flows, like it's literally, it's currency. It's designed to move. So how are we moving it? And at what speed and pace? Is it literally in and out? Or is it, no, this is going to come to me. I'm going to build this. I'm going to increase this currency and capacity. And then it's going to go over here and there's more to come. Because we don't worry with the electricity in our house, at least not here. You know, you switch it on, it works. We know that it's going to flow around the house and the plugs are going to work. So same with money. It's just, it's money. Currency.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jenny, for all of your wisdom. We could stay here for ages and I would have another 20 questions for you. Thank you so much for being so generous with all of your metaphors and examples. And I think you really make this topic of nervous system that could be a little bit complicated if it's explained in a very technical way, but you make it so accessible, so simple. And then with these examples, it's like, yeah, sure, we remember this thing. We're going to remember the metaphor of the anchor. We're going to remember how anxiety and excitement, they're actually quite similar for the nervous system. So thank you so much for being so generous with your wisdom.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on the podcast, because I love talking about all things nervous system and identity and expansion and, you know, being wealthy and spiritual, because those two can go hand in hand.
Absolutely. So where can listeners find you online if they want to learn more from you, maybe ask you a question? Where's the best place to hang out with you?
So best place to find me is on Instagram. I'm at Jenny Adams Coach. Or if you're a listener, then I have a podcast called Calm Your Nervous System. So that's on all the normal platforms. So yeah, come drop me a message. I've got a website, jennyadamscoach.co.uk. So come find me. There's lots and lots that I offer and give out, and I've got various tools that you can start to utilize straight away as well.
So we're going to have all those links in the show notes in case you want to learn more from Jenny, she has a wealth of wisdom inside of her. And I always like to finish the episodes with 3 rapid fire questions. So literally the first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Yeah, go for it.
When was the last time you felt bliss?
I think this morning. Both me and my husband, I don't know what's going on with the planets at the moment, both had a nightmare last night, which is really odd, which we don't normally do. And I just remember waking up and having a cuddle with him in bed before I'd even opened my eyes. And I was going through one of my morning routines, my mental rehearsal. And I just remember lying in bed and just being like, I'm so lucky to have such an incredible husband and the life I'm living and the business I run and the clients I work with, and just that bliss moment. And that was this morning.
So beautiful. So beautiful. I'm so happy for you. Can you think of what idea that fundamentally changed your life?
One idea, as in an idea I've had, or an idea I've
an idea someone shared with you, or an idea you had?
Probably the idea to quit my job. when I realized I'm working in war, I worked for the Ministry of Defence, and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? This is not me. No, get out. What if I could wake up when I wanted and work the hours I wanted and help people and run my own life? What would that be like? What? And 6 years later, here we are. So thank you for that idea.
That idea changed everything.
Yes.
And if you could choose one rule that everybody in the world needs to obey, what would it be?
Don't listen to the rules, because I'm not someone who listens to rules. No, probably regulate. Having a space where regulation, nervous system, all of this stuff, identity, subconscious, we had an understanding of this stuff. It was taught in schools and financial literacy. I think so many of the world's issues wouldn't be happening if we all understood this. But I also know if we put rules on people, they break them, myself included. So that's why we can't set rules.
Regulate, and also don't listen to them.
Yeah. If it feels good for you, do it. Yeah, literally. Yeah. It's the one thing that obviously, I want to move to Australia, that I keep being like, I think they're really hot on rules, and I'm not. I'm very grey. I live in the grey zone, not the black and white. We'll work around this.
The UK also has many rules. So I think if you've managed to create your own space in the UK, you will be just fine in Australia.
True. Because I don't follow them.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Again, it's been a true joy to have you. I will see my listeners in the next episode. And in the meantime, in Blisstopia we trust. If you loved this episode, spread the word, share the episode with a friend who would love to hear this, subscribe to the show, and leave a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. This real quick action on your side helps the podcast grow, reach more women around the world, and it would literally make my day. I will see you next Friday for the next episode, and in the meantime, in Blisstopia we trust.